when you are going from something that makes you feel trapped and contracted and stuck and just the ickiness of life, right? In order to get out of that, it's going to take courage in some way, shape, or form. And so that looks different for everyone. But that is exactly what it's going to take in order to leap from that level where you're just feeling weighed down to the next level where you feel expansive, where you see the opportunities. And so when I speak to some of the women that reach out to me and they're like, I'm stuck in whatever area, or I'm feeling like I'm in the old paradigm, or I'm under societal conditioning, that's usually the advice that I give them. Where in your life are you seeing that courage is calling you?
Welcome to Reward, the podcast of The Trust. We are the show specifically for women entrepreneurs who want to build businesses into the multi-million-dollar revenues and beyond, but especially because we know the reward is much greater than that. I'm Sara Y Brown, and I'm excited to introduce you to these diverse female leaders from a variety of industries, women making huge impact and who are unwilling to settle for the status quo. On the web, visit jointhetrust.org to learn more about our modern community for forward-thinking 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. That's jointhetrust.org. See you there. Now, get ready to enjoy this episode's powerful conversation. Sara Y Brown. Hi.
Hello. How are you, Allie Brown?
I'm good. I like your retro wood panel. Is that actually the wall, or is this like a set?
No, this is not a set. Everyone thinks that is my real wall. It's throughout the house, like in different areas. Like I am in the woods, so this is for real.
That's how walls come in the woods. Like that's what you get.
It is.
Yeah. Do you still have animals, or are you on kind of the farm?
So I will tell you, we got the goats, and then we ended up rehoming them because we were still traveling a lot. So it's like I'm in farm life 1 foot, but 1 foot is still in like business real life. So it's like you have to be totally committed to, have the animals.
Bet.
So yeah, our neighbors are real cool, and they have a bunch of animals already. So we had like 2 little baby goats, and they took them over. So we still go visit, and the kids have fun and go play, but I don't have the responsibility, and I'm okay with that right now.
To get farm life without all the responsibility. That yes, sounds good.
It's a huge commitment. Because we even tried, like, we have fruit trees, which is cool, but we tried growing the food, and that is a lot of work. I mean, you have to be fully committed. So we weren't there yet.
We were all kind of thinking this way a few years ago, and Sara and I have been on the same page, about a lot of things. And I think when we all were kind of thinking, okay, the world may end, and we are going to be needing to butcher our own food. I was like 1 click away one night, probably a bottle in, I was 1 click away from ordering, I believe, a full chicken coop hatchery set, thinking like, well, we're going to need to raise chickens and grow eggs. Cause we were in this place and time of really, I think none of us knew what was going to happen, and it was just crazy. And then something shifted though. I mean, and not just the narratives, but I do think, something has shifted over the last year or two that we feel a bit more settled. Let's start with that, because the last time we talked, there was a lot of, crazy things going on. I mean, there still are today, don't get me wrong. But it seems like we've all kind of just settled into a new place, but it's a different place for sure.
Yes, totally agree with you. It's funny. I laugh about buying the farm, but I'm a quick starter. So like, whereas a lot of people had the idea to do it, I just went and did it. And so I suffer the consequences of being a quick starter. I will tell you right now, but it's just funny to me. But looking back, I do see, a lot of people tell me that they're still in that place where they want to get one, but maybe they're not taking action on it. And I agree with you that like when 2020 hit, it was a huge disruptor. And so a lot of people, depending on your personality type and how you proceed and whether you sit with things or whether you just go gung-ho, I think a lot of us were figuring out how we're going to react to this, or if we're even going to react to this. And so I think 2020 and 2021 was really that period of just major uncertainty, like a very shaky feeling. We had lots of avenues we could go. There was so much information, there was so much going on. It was just an amplification of energy and a disruption in everything that was a status quo. And so I think many of us who decided to question, like, okay, do I want to go back to normal? Do I want to fight this? Do I want to embrace it? I think a lot of us that had that time of introspection and reflection, we might be feeling a little bit more settled now. And I still think there is a ripple of people who are just now coming to that time of period where they're being reflective and looking at things. So they might feel the uncertainty still, whereas someone like you and me, when we were going through it in 2020 and 2021, now we feel a little bit more clarity and a little bit more groundedness and very clear on the direction we want to go.
Yeah. Life feels more settled now. Like I'm back at Dry Bar and, I'm not thinking of ordering chickens at this point. Maybe in the future, we're all going to come bunk up with you because you know what you're doing, actually, if we ever do that.
Well, I also love that aspect of things is like not to forget like the feeling that we had, not to forget the things that we were like, well, maybe I don't need to. Like for me, one of the things we did a lot prior to 2020 is we did DoorDash all the time. So now I'm on the farm and I was planning on like growing my own food. I'm not there yet, and that's okay. But I'm also not back to the door dashing every day either. I think I've taken a little bit more self-sufficiency. So I'm not fully self-sufficient, but I didn't forget like the lessons that we've learned.
Yeah. Tell everyone about you and your different businesses if they're not familiar with you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to share that. So I have a very, boots on the ground brick and mortar business, which is an HVAC business, which is air conditioning and heating. And that's here in Houston, Texas. And I also have a property management business that's also here in Houston, Texas. And then I do online sovereignty support. There's not a strict business foundation. I wouldn't call myself a business coach whatsoever. I just share some of the things I know through my podcast, which is called Renegade Revolution Radio. And through that avenue, and also some of the things I share on Instagram, I have people reach out to me that are like, hey, I want to do some of the stuff that you're doing. I want to change some of the things that I'm doing in life. I want to break out of some of the conditioning or the things that I believed was the way I was supposed to live my life. So when people reach out to me, I call myself a sovereignty support mentor. I don't have a framework because there's no framework for sovereignty or breaking free or liberating yourself from the societal conditioning. But that is what I do through my podcast and through Instagram as well. And I'm very excited to say that we are launching a new parasite cleanse company that should be coming out later this year. I'm partnering with another member of the Trust, which is your group, Allie. And so she has the health background and I have the spiritual energetic background of how it is dealing with parasites. So we're very excited to launch that parasite cleanse company coming on later on this year.
All right. Explain this whole concept of sovereignty to women listening who may not be familiar with it and be like, what are you talking about? Is this about time freedom or, all these concepts you're talking about, like liberation and freedom and being an entrepreneur?
Sure, I'm happy to. And I know that there are many stepping into it, like I mentioned, with everything that happened around COVID and that being a major disruptor. I think that there have been many people who were looking in different areas of their life and realizing, okay, I've been living in this certain way for a long time. And society has, before COVID, said that we always have to live this way. And so many of us might have been living that way, even though maybe we were uncomfortable or we didn't like it, but we just did it because we thought that's the way it had to be done. And so some people, even before COVID, were realizing, okay, maybe I don't have to live this way. But I think once COVID hit, we saw it in all areas of our life. So those of us who felt that calling when the disruption happened, we evaluated the areas of our life that were living under societal conditioning or what society has considered normal. And then we were like, wait, we don't have to do it this way. And so that is what sovereignty is all about, the sovereignty movement that's happening. That is what led me to start Renegade Revolution Radio, because I do believe we are in an era that if you're feeling called or if you feel discomfort from doing things the way we've always done things, there is now a new energy or there's an amplification of energy that allows us to break free from societal conditioning. And because I know that I'm talking about something that maybe not everyone understands because it's a new paradigm and perhaps we haven't had these conversations. So there's an education piece that has to happen when we're going through this. But just to be very practical, an example of this would be like before COVID, when everyone was told like children had to go to school in a very traditional way. You had to go to a school in a building and everyone had to do that Monday through Friday from this time to that time, right? And then many of us parents, I mean, I always was like, is there a hybrid model or is there something else? Like, can we do 2 days a week? Can we do 3 days a week?
Yeah, because I like them gone, like half the time.
It is nice. It is nice. Yes. And so since COVID, there has been a huge increase. I'm here in Texas, and there has been a 30% increase in homeschool children. So parents that are just like, hey, after COVID, we don't really want to send our kids back to school. So they've just kept them at home during homeschool. But even here in Texas, there's a lot, and this is nationwide actually, but there is a lot of like hybrid models that are happening where it is 2 days a week, like 9 to 2, Tuesdays and Thursdays, or things of that nature, where they're doing some partial online learning, partial in the school. So that is just one area. But when I'm talking about sovereignty, I'm talking about sovereignty and liberation in all areas, whether that be education, whether that be your business model, whether that be healthcare, whether that be your financial status or how you are bringing in wealth or different revenue streams. So, and also spirituality as well, whereas in the past, there might have been some dogmatic ways to practice spirituality or religion. Now people are like a little bit more open to saying, well, maybe I don't want to do it this way I've always been doing it. Maybe there's an alternative or a different way that feels true to me and doesn't limit me. So that is what the sovereignty movement is about.
Yeah. If there was one theme I think was the most beneficial for just everyone over the last few years, is they started questioning everything.
Yep.
And so, you question one thing and then it leads to the next thing, the next thing. I know the thing for me originally that kicked me off and really got me looking at life differently was when I started my first business. For many women, that is a turning point, right? Because you're breaking the societal norms of going for the job and like ascending this ladder of success and suddenly you're making your own rules and you're deciding like how you're going to work and when you're going to work. And we forget we could even do that in the beginning. I remember the first week, I think I had my little marketing business in my 20s. I was at my desk at 8 o'clock because there's nothing going on, but I was like at my desk at 8 o'clock because I just thought I had to be,
Right.
And we still, it's interesting, even with all the choices that we then have, like the levels of liberation, we seem to create new rules then. It's interesting. So, for me, and for many women I work with, the business is that first thing that they're starting to be like, oh, I really can create the life I want. Because suddenly they're questioning then, wait, the school thing doesn't go with this because now I can travel and then with tech and have freedom. And it's like, boom, boom, boom. And I think, and then even health, right? Like when you start to unplug from the system or there's things going on, you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So where are we going to go now? Then you realize, oh my God, we're healthier than we have ever been because I haven't seen a doctor in
Absolutely.
a long time. Or I'm not going to these great naturopaths. And, there's just all these different ways of doing things. And that's what's so exciting to me right now. Do you see other women all embracing this right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I'm mentioning all the different areas and avenues of freedom and liberation. And I'm seeing people realize it from a very ground level. So yes, I do see the women that are like, I have a lot of corporate friends and people who I mentored in the past when I worked in corporate that have reached out saying like, oh, wait a minute, you're not in corporate anymore. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm in,
oh, wow.
I'm in entrepreneurship now. And so I see it on that level where they are reaching out and they're like, well, how do I break free from like the corporate life? And I always used to joke when I worked in corporate, calling it like the golden handcuffs, because people believe like that's not my term, it's someone else's, but I love that term because it was when you start to see the golden handcuffs, you see it in every area of life. It takes time, maybe sometimes once you break free from one, but you see how we have these golden handcuffs that keep us tied into the old paradigm. And that's what stops us from liberating. But yes, like I said, I have seen women who are CEOs and very high level C-suite execs from corporate that I've talked to on LinkedIn. And they're like, wait a minute. There is another way for me. And I'm like, yeah, there's definitely another way. And for them, some of the easiest steps have been just going into consulting, doing the same thing they're doing, but now they're not tied to that one company. They can do it for multiple companies, and then they can take back their power so that they're not tied into those golden handcuffs. There is a risk that comes with that. Of course, it takes the courage to take the first step. And that's in all levels of sovereignty. I always love to refer to, David Hawkins, like the scale of consciousness. If you're not familiar with that, David Hawkins, he has many books, but one of the best books I love is called Power versus Force. And it is very academic, very heavy. But one of the the things that I love about that is that there's like a scale of consciousness. And in that scale of consciousness at the lower levels, you're in like lack and scarcity. And, there's anxiety, there's worry, there's doubt, there's guilt, shame, blame, right? And then on the higher levels, then you have like harmony and peace and joy and love and gratitude. But between the two, there's a very important part, and that is courage. And so on that level of consciousness, in order to move from those lower level base energy and move into the higher energy, it takes courage. That is like the game changer. And so that is in every area of life. Like when you are going from something that makes you feel trapped and contracted and stuck and just the ickiness of life, right? In order to get out of that, it's going to take courage in some way, shape, or form. And so that looks different for everyone. But that is exactly what it's going to take in order to leap from that level where you're just feeling weighed down to the next level where you feel expansive, where you see the opportunities. And so when I speak to some of the women that reach out to me and they're like, I'm stuck in whatever area, or I'm feeling like I'm in the old paradigm, or I'm under societal conditioning, that's usually the advice that I give them. Where in your life are you seeing that courage is calling you? You know what it is, because everyone deep down knows exactly where they're being called to show some courage. It's just taking the steps. Awareness is first, and then we take the action behind it.
So how did you become who you are today? Your backstory is corporate, and weren't you at an oil and gas company or something really like good old boy, super traditional?
Yeah.
How did you become who I now refer to as the Morpheus? You're like our Morpheus of the trust. That's how I've always referred to you. Like Sarah comes in and like gives us these truth bombs, and we're like, oh, we didn't realize we were still stuck in the matrix. And so to walk through kind of your evolution, over the last, what's it been 10 years now, or not even?
Since I left corporate,
Yeah.
is that what it is? Yeah. I think I left corporate. What year was it? 2016, I left corporate.
Okay. So not even 10 years. Wow.
Not even 10 years. No, it's been huge. And I would say like, it feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, 2020 feels like a lifetime ago. So, that's for sure. But so I guess maybe it feels like 2 lifetimes ago since I left corporate. But I will say, like, when you ask like what led me to be the way that I am, I will say that I feel like in some levels I was born with a certain amount of it. I think we all are. I think all of us have some spark or some fire within us. And I will say that the journey I've been on has at sometimes suppressed that fire, and then at other times amplified that fire. So I will say that like the zest for life and the wanting to do things different and wanting to experience different things and not follow societal conditioning, I will say I was born with that. And then I was born into a family that was very old school, traditional. I'm a foreigner. I'm an immigrant to this country. My parents were very blue collar. So it was just a lot of like, these are the rules, we follow the rules. And
I bet you were a pain in the ass.
Oh,
were you a total pain in the ass?
No, because
child?
The thing is, I'm very empathetic, I guess, and compassionate. I've always been that way. So I never wanted to make my parents feel bad. So I was bad in the sense that I was a renegade even from birth, but they never experienced it. So around them, I never talked back or none of that stuff. I didn't do that kind of thing. But I was always up to no good and behind the scenes. I was just clever enough not to get caught doing it by them. So I kept them from the headache. But always, like, I know I grew up kind of poor, and I remember like I went to a rich school. My parents always kept us in affluent schools, and the rich kids at school, their parents would give them like $100 bills all the time. But they were kind of lazy. They didn't like to stand in long lines. So even though I was poor and I was on free lunch, what I would do is I would tell the rich kids, give me your money, I'll buy your lunch, because I would make an agreement with the line monitor, the teacher that was monitoring the lines. I would get cut in the front of the line, buy all the rich kids their food, and I told them that the change was mine. So then I would keep the change. So those are the kinds of things. I mean, I would say that fire in me to do things differently and just see where the obstacles can turn into opportunities. I think I've been doing that from birth. But I will say that every level of life that I've done has contributed to it. And so when I was in corporate, I was always noticing different ways to do things, even within corporate. But corporate did have the parameters. So I won't say I always followed the parameters. I would go outside the lines a lot. So there was never a fear of like doing things my way, even though I might have to pay the consequences. And I did. There were times in corporates, and like you said, I was in oil and gas and energy. So you're talking, I mean, my clients were like Chevrons and Exxons and all the names that you know. Those were our clients, and I would still break the rules even with those clients within reason. I no breaking of laws, but we would go, we would test the grounds and test our boundaries. And so in times that has served me well, but in times that has really, I've had to pay a price for it. But I feel like every time I paid a price, I learned a valuable lesson and then took that on to whatever I was doing next. So
Mm-hmm.
I love to test things and try to do things my way to the best of my ability. And so, yeah, that comes with the territory. But I think that once you start doing that, you see and you feel a sense of liberation. You might not do it in every avenue in life, but once you get a little taste of like, wait a minute, someone is telling me I have to do it this way, and I'm going to try to do it just a little bit different. And then you
Mm-hmm.
see that like, okay, wow, okay, I feel good about that because you're staying true to yourself. And so I think people can get away with a lot more than they think they can, but because of that fear and the failure to follow that courage just a little bit, they feel stuck. And then I think that every time that you don't do something that you feel very called to do, like something inside of you is it's like a divine inspiration, and if you don't take a little bit of action on that divine inspiration, I feel that is a form of self-betrayal. And I think that
Mm.
with time, if you do enough self-betrayal, the fire within you, like, I won't say it completely goes out, but you won't even feel it anymore. And so to me, it's always been important not to betray myself too much. I've done it. I mean, we're all guilty. We're all human. I've done it and I paid the price for it, and I've learned, and life has redirected me. And so now I'm at a point where it's like when I feel that divine inspiration, I'd like to take some form of action on it.
Yeah. When I was just on another interview where I was being interviewed, and I was sharing how growing up I was always back then envious of the kids who were so set on, they knew what their career was going to be. You know what I mean? They're
Mhm.
like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be all this stuff. And then now, we're later on in life, and many of those people who decided that like, this is what I'm doing no matter what, and never listened to maybe changes in their heart or things that they really wanted. It's just it and I'm generalizing, but this is like that kind of category of people, which I feel would be the opposite of what I am. I'm just my business and my life has always followed my personal evolution. Like my
Mhm.
evolution leads and I
Mhm.
follow. And those are the people, you use that word betrayal. And I just felt that really deeply, that I think there were a lot of people who just never listened to what their soul was crying out for or what they really
Mhm.
wanted. And then you see those of us that look crazy, right, to so many of them. And because we try on things and we leave situations that other people may look at and go like, why did you leave that relationship? Why did you leave that
Right.
company? Why did you leave that
Mhm.
career? And it doesn't make sense to them.
Mhm.
So is that following that feeling, like the first time you felt that so strong to leave corporate? What was that feeling to leave? Because that was a big decision.
Well, in hindsight, I don't I don't know why I struggled with it so much, because I did struggle with it. I was doing everything I can to stay in corporate, but life was telling me it was time. Like my time was over. At that point, I mean, when I was in corporate and I loved it and it was my calling and it was where I was meant to be at that time. I loved it. I loved it. There was the challenges, of course, with anything in life, but I didn't feel like an internal like battle at all. But when it came
Mm-hmm.
towards the end and it was time to go, and I knew it was time to go, everything started to become difficult. Like everything felt like I was fighting so hard. Like I think at that time I had a team of like 100 employees that worked, you know, um, below me or whatever, that
Wow.
were my responsibility. And I loved that before, but towards the end, that last year in corporate, whatever could go wrong was going wrong. I was not any different of a leader. My team was just as good as they had ever been, but it just felt like we were failing in area after area after area. The clients were becoming more difficult. Everyone was fighting me. We weren't meeting our revenue goals. It was just like there was gossiping going on. And then I had some team members trying to get me fired, which had never happened in corporate because I'm so drama free. And so towards the end, I don't know why I was holding on so long. Well, I do know there was that fear of like, taking a leap and following the internal voice. But the internal voice, when you start to respect it, it shows up externally. So when you start to respect it, I respected my internal voice, but I fought it. So I was telling it, not right now. I'm not ready to leave corporate. What am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to make this income like if I leave just yet, like I had gotten comfortable in life. I have a family to support, and I was like, I can't just take this leap of faith. And at that time, my husband had some stuff going on as well. And so it's like income wise, we needed my income. And so all of this left brain logic was like talking, even though the internal voice was like, there's something better. There's something better. But it wasn't telling me there was something better. It just said, you need to leave. At that time, it was just like, you need to leave. Right.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
So you didn't know the next steps, but you just knew that first step.
Absolutely. I just knew that what I was supposed to do was quit that corporate job and perhaps just maybe consult or something. I hadn't thought of what was coming next. I just knew my time in corporate was done, and I was fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And it wasn't until I knew that there was no other step for me to take. I had to leave, because if I didn't leave, it wasn't even that I was going to get fired, because like my bosses loved me, but it was just like there was every day when I would go and pull into work, I would have to give myself a pep talk. If you hear something, it's my dog. I have a 130-pound Rottweiler, and he is sleeping and he snores. So I'm sorry about that. I can't.
It's like another husband.
Hopefully, I know it's worse. It's much worse. But I love him, so it's all good. But yeah, it was when I realized I was giving myself a pep talk every day. And then I will say during that time, I was numbing out with lots of drinking I had become. So I was not the same person I was inside. I was numbing out with like drinking and watching Housewives. And I think one day my stepson had gone to his mom's house for the weekend. And when he came back, his mom called concerned saying, hey, she called my husband saying, I hear that Sarah, all she does is like get stressed out about work and then drink wine and eat cheese and watch Housewives.
The worst part of that being watching Housewives, let's be clear.
And it was
the other stuff, I'm like,
funny.
I'm not embarrassed about that. And I would be like, oh, they know I'm watching that.
It was sad because it was like that. That's all he thought I did. And it's funny because when I bring this, I love my stepsons, and they're in their 20s now. And so when I tell him that story, he has no recollection. He's like, I never said that about you, Sarah. I'm like, you did, but it's okay. But it was exactly the wake up call I needed, because that portrait of me, when I heard it out loud from someone else, I was like, wait, that's not my life, is it? And so the reason I share this is because internally I knew what had to be done. I fought it, and my internal, composition created an external circumstance that I knew I had to follow the internal, because it was like, wow, everything in life sucks right now. And it's because inside of me, I know what needed to be done, and I was fighting it. And so when my external was like that, I knew I had to do something. And so that's when I took the leap of faith. And sure enough, everything did get better. I didn't know the next steps. I knew one step: leave the corporate. But besides that, the rest of the steps started to manifest. And it was beautiful, because it was like, even though I had challenges, I felt my spark inside back. It wasn't easy. I had boots on the ground. I was going door to door knocking. I was calling up, companies I had worked for in the past. And so it was just like, there was a lot that I had to do. There was elbow grease, there was hard work, there was dedication, there was commitment, but the fire inside of me was back. So I didn't care. I was working 16-hour days at that time. It didn't matter, because it was like, I had the energy to do it, because I was I had that reignition within.
Yeah. So segue us to today.
Mm-hmm. So today, a lot of that is still going on. So now I think what's beautiful about the place I am, so growing the business and getting it to the place where many of the businesses operate without me directly in it. I'm more of the visionary, and then financial, of course, but like as far as the day-to-day parts of the business, a lot of that is carried out by our team members. And so what's beautiful about that is, one, just the excitement of building something and creating something from nothing. I think that gives such a great and beautiful sense of confidence that in the past, some of the areas maybe I questioned or had some doubts. And I'm not saying I never get self-doubt. Every time I'm going into a new business venture, a little bit of that doubt creeps in. But what's beautiful is the internal voice within me and the external output of what I'm doing. They are one. There is harmony. There is balance. They are one. They are merged. And so I think that is so beautiful, because that gives a sense of freedom in the things that we're doing, So it's like, I don't have as much of an internal a fight. And then I'm not so concerned about the outcome. It's more of like, Am I listening to that voice? Am I being true to myself? Do I feel that fire and that spark within me? And if that's the case, it really doesn't matter what I do on a day-to-day basis, because it's like, if it's wrong or if it's not meant to be, I'll get redirected, and I know that. So anytime I find that I'm fighting, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that feeling. That's me fighting that. I'm fighting my redirect. And so now there's just, like I said, there's a liberation that comes along with that, because I don't feel so much pressure to figure it out, to perfect things. I don't feel such the constraint of like, okay, I need to reach this outcome in order to be happy, in order to be successful, in order to be free, in order to be, have joy or peace. It's like all of that stuff comes from listening to that divine voice inside me and focusing on that internal guidance. And then once I do that, the external reflects what I feel inside. And so I'm not chasing any outcomes anymore like I was in the past. So that has been one of the biggest rewards of doing what I'm doing now, is that the freedom and the I guess the relief of like the burden of having to do things a certain way and having to perform for some outcome. That is not how I live my life anymore. And I try to encourage everyone on my team to do the same. So even though I have people who work for me now, I'm creating an environment where they don't have to feel the way I felt in corporate, where they can feel a sense of freedom in what they do, where they take ownership of their role, where they can, have freedom, like with their schedule or what they're like if they're multi-passionate, we create a workspace where they're able to do the work that they're doing for the company in order to make some income and provide a life, but they also have the time and the freedom to follow some of their other passions that keeps their spark also as lit up as mine is, so it's like it has a ripple effect. And that's one of the best parts of having a business and creating it in this way.
Sara, I remember when I first met you, you didn't even talk to me about your spiritual stuff. If you remember the first conversation we had when we met on Zoom, and you were talking to me about the HVAC company, and you were doing this referral business and things like that. And I don't know if you remember this, but I was kind of just looking at you and I was going like, like, what are you not telling me? I was like, there's something there. I said something like, there's this whole spiritual side to you that I was like really feeling, Talk to us about, your spiritual evolution over the last few years, especially, and like how you're really, to me, in my observation, it's just you've wholly embraced it. Like it is who you are. Like you shine this light. Like it just, that is Sara Y Brown. Like is what you're bringing to everyone around you, and we've noticed it, in the trust as well. So talk about that spiritual kind of, it was a bit of a coming out, if I could call it that, over the last several years.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes me laugh because I remember our first Zoom call very clearly, and it was extremely like left brain, logical, analytical strategy. And I could tell that you were like, wait a minute. And I think you cut our meeting kind of short, and we're like, I want you to take a couple of days just out at, I don't know if you said in the wilderness, you might've said a hotel or something like that, but you gave me an assignment to go spend some time with myself alone. And I love that assignment. I hope I'm not giving away your strategy, but
no, I forgot that. I didn't remember that part. So good.
Yeah, no, it was exactly, I always tell my husband, and because we talked about it afterwards, and I was like, you kind of gave me the permission, not that I needed it, but you gave me that permission to like, wait a minute, you need to sit with yourself for just a moment, because something else is happening here, and it's not just business and, strategy related. And I love that assignment because it really did help me hone in on, what I was going through. I think I was just in the go phase at that point, like with the excitement of the business and all that stuff, that I had like forgotten to like take some time to integrate what's all happened. So I will say that, like I mentioned, I have been spiritual from birth, but what happened is I came into a very religious family. And so my family that I was raised with, they were extremely religious and extremely dogmatic. And so for me, I kind of hid my spirituality aside, because my spirituality in their eyes was wrong, because it was very like intuition driven. And for some people, and I'm not saying all religious people are like this, but they were extremely dogmatic. And so to them, I came off as a witch. you want to
Yeah.
call it
Oh,
that.
now many religions are dogmatic, but what, if you don't mind sharing, what was your religion of your family that you were being
Well,
raised
so I'm
in?
a very mixed person. So I have Islam is half of my family. They're Islamic, they're Muslims, and then I also have Hindu family because I'm half Indian, and then I also have Catholic family. So they're all three of those religions are very prominent and very
Yeah.
distinct. And it's like not even just the ones that say it by name but don't practice. No, all of them are very strict in their beliefs. They practice their beliefs and all that. So to them, it was always weird when I would say things like, oh, and I don't think as a kid I called it intuition. I just would say things like, oh, the inner voice says I shouldn't do this, or the inner voice, so I would talk in sometimes weird ways like that. And then, I would be like, oh, my body is telling me that this is not the right thing to do. And,
And they're
to my
like,
dad, that would creep him out. He's like, what, wait, what?
yep.
So, and then I think there was also a sense to them that like when you trust yourself and your body, that you're saying that you don't need God. But to me, I feel me and God are one. So when I think about my body, it's the creation of the creator. So there's no distinction I don't have to separate those two things. So when I listen to my body, God is speaking to my body. And so I'm listening to God through my body. You know what I mean? So like, I know that some people don't want to believe that. And I don't ask that everyone believe that. But because my family kind of looked down on that side of things, and I felt the need to suppress it, so that's the reason why some of the times I was like numbing out and kind of running away from my true self. And so what happened is after leaving corporate, I definitely started to step back into my true self. But I will say that I think what really kicked it off was hitting the 7-figure mark was a definite one for me, because when I left corporate, my real main mission was like, I got to get my business to $1 million, because I thought that was like going to be the end all be all. I would have made it. I would have been successful, and like I would be happy with myself. And when I reached that point, and I think that was in 2018, I call myself the saddest millionaire, because when I hit it, I was like, oh, okay, hold on. That was not the thing that I've been searching for. And really, it's not that I was searching, it was an uncovering. Is that after that happened, I realized, okay, it's not about the $1 million business, it's not about the business success, it's not having made it or being successful in that definition. It was that the part of me that I had suppressed for years wanted to be re-revealed. It wanted to be uncovered again. It wanted to be tapped back into. And so that is really what kicked it off in 2018. And so what I'll say is, while I was going through that internal thing from 2018 to 2020, when I talked to you, in 2020 was my coming out. It was like I had shed the guilt and the shame that I had felt from childhood of not being religious, and I say that with air quotes because it's like, I am religious, you know what I mean? But like, because I was looked at as not being religious, there was some shame that I had around that. And so what happened between 2018 and 2020 is a clearing and a healing of that shame, because that wasn't my burden to carry. I really never should have felt any shame or guilt, because we're all on our own path in life. And so everyone's path is different. No one path is better than the other, because eventually everyone's path leads to the same thing, which is a reconnection with your divine source, and the merger that I mentioned between you and your true self. So all of us are on the same path. We're just at different levels of it. And so I think what happened between 2018 and 2020 was just the realization of that, remembering that that's what's truly important. And so after 2020, I was like, oh yeah, I don't have to compartmentalize the different sides of me. It's like, I am me. And if you like it, awesome. Let's have fun and party and enjoy life. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. That's okay
Yeah,
too.
like the word that just came to me is integration. I think a lot of us have gone through
Yeah.
this incredible integration of,
Mhm.
just over the last few years. So Sarah, what is the reward for you?
For me, I would say the biggest reward is definitely coming back home to myself. I think that getting back to who I truly am has brought in a level of liberation, freedom, sovereignty, which is the theme of what I am. And so I think coming back home to myself has given me, I wouldn't say I don't have a new sense of purpose. I just remembered what my purpose was. And that purpose is really to just be here and to serve, the divine side of me and to really be empowered from within. And so for me, the biggest reward has been really coming back home to that. And I think that has afforded me a bunch of luxuries that I wouldn't have maybe considered luxuries in the past. So like my idea of success and my definition of success has totally changed. My source of happiness and my source of peace has totally changed. All of these things are internally sourced versus externally sourced. So it makes living this life much easier when that's the case. When you hand over that, the desire and the passion and all of that stuff, when you hand it over to the divine within is what I would call it, it takes a burden off you, the human. And so you're able to navigate this life with a confidence and a comfort and a peace that I don't know if you could get that if you didn't hand it over in that way. And so I think for me, that's been the biggest reward, is that I don't expect life to be different. I don't expect, to not have any challenges or difficulties or growing pains, because as I continue life, I'm going to experience different challenges. Like we live in a world today where you can't control what's happening on the outside. I mean, it's going fast. It's moving really quickly. We can't control it. And I have no desire to. So in the past, where maybe I was taking on too much ownership myself and not really trusting that divine within, it was like any kind of life circumstance could shake me up. I could feel, like I said, the disruption, and it could have the best of me. And so now I'm at a place where no matter what happens outside of me, I have this internal source that is unwavering and that can handle anything. And so I'm not scared of anything in life anymore. I'm just like, all right, let's do this. Let's enjoy the ride. And whatever happens. I'm good for it. I can handle it.
I love that. Sara, where can everyone follow you? What are the best places these days?
So I am on social media. So you can follow me I'm on Instagram, and it's at Entrepreneur Sara, and that's Sara without an H. I also have the podcast, which is Renegade Revolution Radio, and you can find that anywhere where you can find podcasts. And we go deeper into some of the sovereignty concepts that we've talked about today.
By the way, in your podcast, suddenly your voice goes down like this. Do you do that on purpose? Or is that just is that just your podcast voice? You're like, hello, renegades. It's like sexy podcast with Sara.
I don't do it intentionally. It's so what you're seeing now is like where I do my regular meetings, but where I record my podcast is like my meditation space. And so I have like a red light in there. Sometimes it's a purple light, and so it's just like, you can get real down and,
See?
So it's like,
there it is. That's it. That was it.
You see the walls are this color. I got the plants. It's very grounding in that room. It's just very comfortable space. And so it's just, that's the voice that comes out at that time.
It's amazing. Yeah. It puts me into this like kind of zone. Sometimes I'm like, I have to wake up. I'm driving,
Yeah. Maybe don't listen to it while we're driving. Yes, that's true.
Well, Sara, just thank you from me to you for being you, and for everything you have brought to the rooms you've been in of mine over the last several years, because you're here to bring just so much truth and power to all the women that you're around. And the fact that you've also built these businesses and are at these levels, it's just a whole other game changer that you could bring it all together. So thank you for being a part of the trust, and thank you for this interview. This was fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. And I also want to say to you, Allie, thank you so much for the space that you provide for us to do that, because I want to say that one of the major parts of me coming out was not only the assignment you gave me on our call, but also having the space to be myself and not be judged, especially when you're coming out or as you're doing anything in life where you're making a leap from who you were to who you are destined to be. I think having a space in order to do that, because in most spaces, like had I turned to some of the groups I was in before, as I was having this spiritual coming out, my other groups were so business oriented. So they would have been like, wait, what are you doing? Because I made a lot of changes during that time that were like, looked good on things that looked good on paper, I ran away from. So I want to say that having that space where I said I'm making some of these changes, and no one judged me and no one tried to talk me out of it. And no one told me it was crazy. Instead, they encouraged me, and you being the leader of that, but the group that you have brought together, everyone was so encouraging. And that really helped to give me that support and that boost that I needed to continue on that path. So I'd also like to say thank you to you for what you're doing with the trust and everything that you're doing, because you've brought together a wonderful group of women that I consider my sisters.
Thank you. Yeah, I love we can talk about, spiritual ascension, and then suddenly we're like employee stock ownership, like it really just runs the gamut. People be like, how is this possible? I'm like, this is who these women are. And it's extraordinary. And we are creating the new ways of working and being and living. And so all of you listening, make sure you follow Sara. And Sara, I'll see you soon, hopefully at the fall meeting.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks, Allie. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Subscribe now to the Reward podcast to be sure to not miss an episode. And don't forget to visit jointhetrust.org to learn more about our modern community for forward-thinking 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. You can learn more, apply to join us, or refer another woman you know who is over the $1 million mark and is ready for a different type of women's network. We have events coming up both live and online that are truly creating new possibilities for female leaders. That's jointhetrust.org. See you there.